Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of New York Got Game. It's your guy, Dexter Henry. We are close to the start of free agency. Yes, free agency begins this week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It all goes down. So much has already happened in the Knicks offseason. It's been just over 2 weeks since the Knicks won the title. Yes, it still feels unreal. They won the title. They are the champions here in 2026. But the Knicks getting some business done and some more business to do after the draft. And so now we're going to preview what could free agency look like for the Knicks. Who will be back? Who won't be back? What could the Knicks' options be? How does this all work around the second apron? Should the Knicks exceed the second apron? These are all questions we have to answer. So I thought there was no person better to try to answer these questions with other than my guy from Knicks Film School. He joins me now on this episode of New York Got Game, the one and only Jeremy Cohen, the host of Cap or No Cap on Knicks Film School, joins me now. Jeremy, how you doing, man?
Dexter, doing great. Still feeling that championship buzz, but
see, I like that.
But at the same time, there's a new season. The quest for a repeat begins now, if not already started with the draft.
Yeah, and I've been saying this. I thought that next season or this offseason would be maybe the calmest offseason that Knicks fans could experience, right? And then next season might be a little bit of a relaxation, but I think I've been proven wrong. I've done some live shows, I've done some other episodes, and I'm really seeing from a lot of fans that it's like, oh, no. We want to get this repeat, which fans should want. Be greedy. I don't want to say be greedy. You should get as much as you can out of this core at this moment now. But fans are really feeling it, and some of that has to do with some potential decision-making from ownership, which we will get into. Look, free agency, Jeremy, we can get into a lot of names. We can do that. But I guess I want to start off with you on this. What do you think is the bigger Knicks free agency question? Who they could sign this offseason? Or what I just kind of alluded to, whether this organization is willing to operate like a defending champion that wants to run it back, and I mean this financially, and exceed the second apron. What do you think is the bigger question? Who they can sign or re-sign and bring back, or whether this organization is going to actually act like a defending champion and bring all the guys back?
Got to go with the latter. It feeds into the former, of course, and it starts with Mitchell Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, everything kind of moves out. You've got your plan B, plan C, and all the other plans that come into place. Plan A, in my opinion, is you should run it back. We can talk about the second apron limitations that come down the line. You can acknowledge that there are issues in the future and still want to maximize this window of time because you just never know. Windows in the NBA are often shorter than people think. And losing key players on paper, that's really challenging. It's hard to win a title. We know it. It's been over 53 years and 53 years, and now it's 0, which is great. Repeating is even tougher, especially in an era that has the most parity that we've ever seen in NBA history, really. So being able to take your team and add to it is important. But if you can't add to it, staying the same roughly, great. But reducing it as other teams get better, that is the greatest challenge because you got to prove this wasn't a fluke. And mind you, this isn't a participation trophy. The Knicks are Larry O'Brien championship winners. That will always be the case no matter what. But we want more. I mean, we're New Yorkers. So what you were saying, it's like, yes, I appreciate everything about what just happened. I want more. I want to see another championship. I want to feel like this is a dynasty in the making. And there are other teams that could get in the way. But if the Knicks are the ones getting in the way of it themselves, that hurts too. And that doesn't feel great as you try to proceed into the next year.
So you and I were talking about this before we started recording. And I was listening to the latest episode you did of Cap or No Cap, where you brilliantly broke down what the Knicks could or couldn't do this offseason, and we'll in the free agency and also with the draft. And this was before the draft, so we'll get into a little bit of that. I was at the same conclusion that you were, that I took at the end of that episode, which was if the Knicks don't exceed the second apron here, that it can be okay if this team operates smartly. And they're very cognizant of what they're doing, and they could have good reasons for not wanting to exceed the second apron, but there's still things they can do to make this roster competitive enough to run it back where you think they can actually defend their title. I was with you on that. Mm-hmm. That was earlier last week. We heard the comments from James Dolan following the championship. Goes on WFAN, talks about he doesn't want to go into the second apron. And all the reporting we've seen now around it, my own colleague Stephen Bondi has talked about this with me. Sounds like James Dolan doesn't want to go in the second apron. Has that changed your mind in any way, or your feeling about what the Knicks should do here this offseason and whether they should exceed the second apron or not, knowing that this is not from necessarily the front office, but it's coming from the ownership and James Dolan?
That's the challenge. With where I was at, I felt how you balance the present and the future. There is a prudent argument to not going above the second apron this year and pushing that down the line. But if it's purely an ownership decision and not a front office decision, that's where I disagree with how the team is moving. Because if that were the case, Brock Aller and his team are among the best, if not the best, in the NBA. They would have figured it out. They can do that. But the other concern gets to, if you are uncomfortable paying to go into the second apron after you've won a championship, are you going to be comfortable doing that the next season, the season after that,
Right.
the season after that? At what point, if you're James Dolan, especially when you see all of this revenue being realized from winning the title, when do you fully invest in the team? Because it's not a luxury tax thing. The Knicks are already well above the luxury tax.
Right.
So yes, there is money being saved, of course, by spending less. There's no doubt about it. But that it doesn't seem like it is a team reason for why the Knicks would be limiting their spending. Based on the reporting that is out there, it feels much more of there's an uncomfortability with paying what it is. And that's a James Dolan decision if that's the case. As we were saying prior to this, it's not our money.
Right.
But we as fans, because it's not our money, we should be interested in the team spending as much as the team possibly can. So not having the ability to run it back and then some, it forces the front office to be more creative on a budget. And they can do that, to be clear. But from the fan perspective, it's really tough. There's an opportunity cost. There's several opportunity costs that could happen. And no matter how you slice it, the Knicks get worse on paper.
And I think you and I listen. We understand this. This is the NBA and where they are right now, right, Jeremy? And we understand with the second apron, it is tougher to keep teams together longer. Your windows are necessarily shorter, but the point you said there is disappointing to the fans, and that's a longer conversation I think you can have, especially when you know what prices cost. You know this to go to. I see you at MSG sometimes for tickets at MSG, for concessions. We also know that the building is always full, no matter what, if the Knicks win or lose. So the Knicks have always been making money. You made a fantastic point about the money that has been made through this run. Now, even after this run, when we talk about championship merchandise that a lot of us and some of us still have on the way,
Yep.
okay, there's a lot of that still being made. So I guess this leads me to the next place when it goes, how do you think fans, because you talked about the fans, and I think that matters so much here, how should they understand the second apron? Is this mostly about James Dolan's tax bill, which the luxury tax the Knicks have already exceeded and in past and been paying? Or is it really about the roster building penalties that could come down the road with it? How should Knicks fans understand why or why not the Knicks may want to exceed the second apron?
It could be both. To start with, absolutely, if James Dolan is unwilling to pay to keep the team together, then that is a focal point. That said, there are other avenues that can open up should the Knicks not be above the second apron. The thing is, with the second apron, especially if you're above it, 7 years out, your first round pick is frozen. And you can exceed the second apron after that for one of the next 4 seasons. And the pick that you would go above the second apron, that pick is frozen too. It thaws when you have left the second apron for enough years. And to me, I should say the third season after that, where if you're above the second apron for 3 out of the 5 years, your draft pick automatically drops to 30. Let's assume it's 32 if there are 2 expansion teams. So that can be tough. To me, the concern isn't how do the Knicks rebuild. I'm worried about what would be really 10 years from now. That's not my concern. My concern is, hey, if you have that pick and you can, or those picks, and you can use them in any way to add to this current core, to keep getting more bites at the apple with Jalen Brunson, that to me is the real win. Being able to trade more of the future for the present. It's just unfortunate that that might have to be a silver lining as opposed to the intentionality of the play. So yes, it can unlock things and it can make things better. It truly can. There is a world here where James Dolan, despite the fan belief of he should spend, could actually walk away looking wise if the player or players that walk are not as impactful for their teams. You simply never know. A frugal decision could wind up actually benefiting the Knicks. It's the fact that if it feels like the reason for going into that isn't smart, pragmatic planning for the team as a whole, but instead for the person footing the bill, that's where the fandom comes into play. And fandom's not always rational, but in this
Fair.
case, I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Fandom isn't always rational, but you want to go through all these hypotheticals here, and you can. James Dolan, for the most part, you know this, has stayed out of the way, which has maybe shocked a lot of us in New York and people who root for the Knicks or cover the Knicks recently. And now this is going to feel for a lot of people like he's kind of coming back in the way. Now, again, to your point, he could be frugal and he could be right. That's possible. He could also be frugal and be dead wrong. And it could prevent the Knicks from maybe keeping the window open as long as they would like it to be. So I don't know. I found it very. We'll see. We'll see though,
Sure.
right? Like time will tell, and we will know not too far from now. Now we know how the Knicks operated the draft. They operated like a team that clearly has no interest in going above the second apron, Jeremy, or at least trying to stay close to under it as possible. The front office, they already took care of Jose Alvarado on a team-friendly multi-year deal. We saw them do the same with Mohamed Diawara. I personally felt Diawara had to be a priority. I was glad to see how they took care of him so quickly. But the Alvarado move, with him extending his deadline and then them taking care of him on the multi-year deal, what does that move tell you about how I'm going to put it this way, trying to thread the needle? Because this is what the Knicks are doing. You're threading the needle when you were trying to either avoid or stay under the second apron. So what did that move tell you about how they're trying to thread the needle and how they might approach this offseason where free agency is beginning in a couple days?
Totally with you, keeping Diawara and Alvarado. Huge wins for the Knicks. Uh, in terms of Diawara and actually Alvarado, we don't have the full contract details. I know that
Right.
what's been reported are multi-year and in Diawara's case, I believe it was 10 million plus and something along those lines. And for Alvarado, I think it was 14 million plus. So there can be some potential flexibility. For Diawara, we don't even know how many years it is. We don't know if it's a 4-year contract. We don't know
Right.
if it's a 2-year contract. We don't know if it's going to be out of the taxpayer mid-level exception or if it's going to be without having to dip into that. Of course, using the taxpayer mid-level exception, that would have hard capped the Knicks automatically. So there's some flexibility, which is good and can tell from how it moves. But in terms of, it seemed that the Knicks maybe had their eyes on a couple players, thought pie in the sky, can we get someone who we feel projects as better than Alvarado, cheaper than Alvarado over the next several years? Of course, that player, even if they're better, they likely wouldn't be better from the jump. And this is a Knicks team that needs veterans that can propel them further. So when I say better, I mean more down the line, but it doesn't matter because this is the time to win. So Alvarado pushing it back shows the ability for him to say, hey, well, if something happens, I have an escape. But if something doesn't happen, I have more in my control because he could opt in and be traded on draft night, especially. That didn't happen. Alvarado couldn't sign an extension until September. So what
Yep.
he did seemingly was opt out and sign for the same amount roughly as his player option and tack on another 2 years. And that was lower than I would have thought. I thought he was going to opt in perhaps and maybe extend for 7 or 8 million dollars. But the one benefit that I think we're seeing with the CBA and maybe a hometown discount comes into play here too with Alvarado is role players. We're starting to see the opportunity cost and where there's just a lot of talent in the league. And I think the market for those guys is shrinking a bit, where you put your money towards stars that are worth it and you have to fill in the gaps. But the second apron, and we're seeing it with a team like the Knicks that doesn't have to do this, is already looking at the dollars and how they don't spend. The Thunder are doing the same thing.
Yep.
Teams are looking at that second apron and they're saying, I don't know, is it really worth it? And it's effectively a soft hard cap, is the best way I can describe it. So the Knicks, with those two guys, made the right moves, and they still have to fill out the rest of the roster, of course. But those were the right steps, or the steps in the right direction for them to continue with this offseason.
I was glad you mentioned the Thunder there too, because so much of the talk when I was doing live draft shows this week was fans were talking a lot like this was exclusive to the Knicks, and I wanted to be like, no, 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 this is not exclusive to the Knicks. The Thunder just won a title the previous year, and they've already sold off two good players, right? Because they're trying to create themselves more flexibility so they could bring back Isaiah Hartenstein, who they just extended. That obviously the Knicks fan base knows very well. This is going to impact a lot of teams that have either won recently, like the Thunder and the Knicks, or are knocking on the door and very expensive. Cleveland is another team you can look at that. They traded out of the first round, laid out the first round, right, to save some dollars there too. So this is impacting a lot of teams in the NBA, and it's very interesting. Now, you mentioned this at the top, Jeremy. Mitchell Robinson, he is the big domino that you're talking about around everything with the Knicks right now. If the Knicks lose him, because they're trying to stay under the second apron, do you look at that as cap guy? I got to ask you this. Is that a responsible cap decision? Or do you look at it, if they lose him, this is just a championship team getting worse?
I do see it as a championship team getting worse. With that said, I think the Mitchell Robinson is effectively a starter. He's a starter playing backup minutes, but there's the health component. And this is not, well, if he walks, here's the PR type of information that you put out there to make yourself feel better about not signing him. But just looking at the facts, this is someone who has dealt with significant injury over the course of several years. There have been a lot of things, whether it's because of his own doing or because someone may have injured him. That's just the way that it goes. But there's also something to be said of, is this player, as good as he is he worth retaining? And the answer could very easily be yes. But then, Dexter, the question I could ask is, what is the threshold for Mitchell Robinson where it's simply too much? At what point is there a dollar figure where, if you are a Knicks fan, and again, not our money, but just from the team perspective and how you build everything, what amount is simply too much for Mitchell Robinson to return? And your mileage is going to vary from fan to fan. But this is someone who, over the last 3 seasons, has seen over 1,000 minutes once last year. And it's because he didn't play in back-to-backs. And at a certain point, especially with, again, the opportunity costs and the other players, if there were a player to lose from your top 7, right? I don't know if it would necessarily be Mitchell Robinson, but because of the contract and the availability, the argument starts to swing in a different direction. Because again, on paper, he is the best player the Knicks could possibly have with the limited avenues of how to get anyone to even fill his shoes. Those would be big shoes to fill. But I do worry over time, is it the soundest of investment? And how can you move with that contract on your books? It's a challenge. I'd still retain him, but the sky isn't the limit. And there are other players that need to either get paid or are being paid.
So that's what I wrestle with too, is what you said there, which is, what's the threshold for him, right? Like, and I'm not sure I have the best answer for that. Do you have a line? Like, again, it's not our money. We're out here talking like this is monopoly money. I get it. It's not our money. But if you were, is there, Mitch, you made a little over $13 million last year. The talk around the league, there's been interest. Lakers interesting. You're interested in him. You've heard about the Kings. You're thinking he's probably getting, this is just me from what we've been reading and hearing, 15 mil, right? Are you willing to go that for somebody who, you said starting caliber center?
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. The injury history is what it is. And on this Knicks team, he's going to be a backup.
Yes.
So for you, I'll ask you, I'll just throw this to you as a follow-up. Would you exceed 15 mil per year to bring Mitchell Robinson back? Would you just do it and say, hey, I'll worry about the rest down the road? Would you maybe front load the contract a little bit more to give yourself flexibility down the road? how would you play it?
I would definitely go with the descending contract. I thought
Okay.
the contract that they signed him to last time, which was also descending,
Yep.
was the right move. But if you're descending, does that mean that you have to your point, raise the first year to make it equitable? And then here's the other thing: how many guaranteed years are you giving Mitchell Robinson? Because another team, if they like the Lakers or even the Nets, if they step in and say, "Yeah, we're comfortable giving 4 years guaranteed," if you're the Knicks, Mitchell Robinson, I believe, is 28 years old. Are you comfortable paying Mitchell Robinson when he's 31 years old? You may be, you may not be. By that point, could you potentially move his contract? Yes. But there's also something to be said of, okay, what if you are looking at a team that wanted Mitchell Robinson, but now if Mitchell Robinson's hurt, there's not a whole lot of interest and you have limited assets. So now are you using your assets when you look for an upgrade to get a contract that is skewing a little bit more negative to being a positive? Or are you
Yep.
just getting to a neutral point? And if you're getting to a neutral point, how can you get that neutral contract to a positive when you've just there's so much that goes into it.
That's the risk, though, right, Jeremy?
Exactly.
I was bringing this up with Stephen Bondi during the live show, and I was telling him, I'm like, I hear you on wanting to bring him back and run it back. I'm. It seems like you and I are having the same dilemma.
Mhm.
I'm with you, but the risk is just because you sign somebody does not mean 2-3 years from now that you can say, oh, it's just easy to get off them. What if he's more injured
Yes.
than he has been before, and now it's harder to move that contract, as you just brought up? It's a great point.
And then are you trusting a third string center? And how are you paying them? Because you need a reliable backup for your backup. Karl Anthony Towns right now, he's been very healthy, which was good for the Knicks. He's, knock on wood, he has been that guy for this team. Karl Anthony Towns is also turning 31 years old. He does have mileage on him. At what point do we start to see him not be a beacon of health? And if
Mm.
that's the case, now your center depth is really hurting because you've got perhaps Towns who's not doing as well. And again, this is all hypothetical. And I
Yeah.
hope that it doesn't even get to this point. But Father Time is undefeated. And
Yep.
if you are in a position where you are down two big men and you're starting your third string center, whether it's Porty or anyone else, how are you able to then field a not just competitive team, but a championship caliber team? You need reliability. Availability is the best ability. They need to be talented too. But if one of your best players is also one of your highest paid players, because he'd probably be fifth if Josh Hart's contract is declined from the team option, and let's say he signs for less. If Mitchell Robinson is your fifth best or fifth most paid player, and he's missing a lot of time, and this core is getting older, that hurts too. You could even argue that that hurts more than simply not going above the second apron and having to be creative. We just simply don't know if that's going to be the way that it goes, or if that's just clearly a hypothetical, which it is.
It is. It's the risk, though. It's
Mhm.
it's trying to look at everything as best as you can and then making a decision. Now, again, we can't predict how it's all going to play out. None of us know. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about potentially replacing Mitch. This is a tough conversation that nobody really wants to have, but we have to have it. We've seen some names out there. Goga Bitadze, Yves Missi, who's a name I would really like, would have to happen in a trade, but I do think there are some pathways to that. Moussa Diabate, interesting, just because the Hornets just got Nas Reed, so that's interesting. Nick Richards, who's been linked to the Knicks for a long time. I think a couple of years ago, you and I talked about him on a
Mhm.
trade deadline show. Andre Drummond as well, too. I'd probably pass on that. They've all been connected to the Knicks as options. Of those names I just mentioned, or you can give me another one if you have, which one do you think makes the most basketball sense, or which one do you think or makes the most cap sense, or is there one that works for both that makes basketball sense and cap sense? What do you say about those names?
So I know that Diabate is the name that has most been kind of bandied about recently in the Knicks universe. I very much like Diabate. A couple things. Number one, do I see a world where the Hornets are trading him? I probably don't.
I don't.
And number two, let's say he were to be on the block. The same issue that we're talking about now, Dexter, just happens next year because Diabate is an unrestricted free agent and he will have made very little. And now he's up for a lot of money. So, yes, he's younger. He's a good player. But if the Knicks are unwilling to go into the second apron this year, what is stopping them, or what encourages us to think that they're going above it next year? So it then kind of spirals from there. And next year, yes, you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who's got a player option. I would expect him to decline it and sign a friendlier deal. You've got Josh Hart on that team option. I wouldn't be surprised if the team option goes away and it's replaced with an extension that's at a lower cap hit per year. And then you've got Deuce McBride, who needs an extension as well. And I will say this also relates to Missi, because I've seen, oh, well, you could move McBride for Missi or that type of deal. And in my mind, it's okay. So the outgoing is Mitch walking and Deuce being traded to replace Mitch's replacement. That feels like a net loss to an even greater extent. And I don't dislike Yves Missi. There's the film stuff I'm not as crazy about from what I have seen, but the numbers do show promise. So that's where the intersection of the X's and O's and the analytics might come into play. But he's young, and I think there's room for growth, especially with someone like Mark Bryant, who has been a great big man whisperer. So there's potential there. But with that said, it's how are you able to keep everyone in-house and probably stay below the second apron again next year? Diabate is not going to be that guy. Richards is the type of player where I think his stock has really plummeted quite a bit. Can get you on the offensive rebounding side, but the rim protection just kind of dropping off a bit. Drummond, same thing, an older player who I don't think it's there. A big body can rebound the hell out of the ball, but it's just not going to be that rim protector that you need. Bitadze, I've looked into that because I like Bitadze. I do. And the thing is, the way that the numbers work, it's tricky. It's tricky to get around that because his contract isn't that large, and you can get creative with how you package salaries, but then it's filling out the rest of your roster. And another player that, of course, comes into play here is Landry Shamet, because if you're retaining Shamet, then there's further opportunity cost with the margins. You have to fill out your roster. You can get to 12 players and then wait 2 weeks into the season to sign 13 and 14. But usually those guys are making a very small amount anyway. So how are you doing it to get Bitadze? One creative way could be.
Sorry, Jeremy, to cut you off.
Of course.
Bitadze, his contract, how many years does he have left, and how much is he making again?
He's got 1 year left this upcoming year. And he's making $7.6 million. So theoretically, if you're the Knicks, you could move Dadier's salary at 2.9 million, really just about 3. You could trade someone like Kolek. And then what's interesting about the offseason is you can sign and trade salary away with a player that's not on your roster. So any of the two-way guys, you could do exactly what the Knicks did with trying to get Karl Anthony Towns, and they were successful. So that is an option, but then it's, okay, so you've got Bitadze in the door. How are you then squeezing the rest of your players in? How much is Shamet making? How are we working backwards from there? Who are the minimum guys? Because you've just hard capped yourself at the second apron. The way that it works with the Knicks is they want to, it seems, be below the second apron. But they could theoretically be above by a little bit and then skirt it at the trade deadline. But if you sign and trade players away, you're automatically hard capping and you can't go above that. So, there's one other player. There's some other free agents too. There's Kevon Looney, who could be a potential option, but I don't know if the health is really there, which is a bit of a concern. Yusuf Nurkic could be another guy where he's a broad player who can rebound really well. He's not one of my favorite options in general, but for the money, if we're talking about what's there, it's a possibility. If you also had to pay these guys a little bit more than the minimum, you could dip into the taxpayer mid-level exception, and that's fine. But a player that I really would love to see the Knicks go after, because, again, the options are just limited across the board, is Ryan Kalkbrenner, who plays for the Hornets. As you mentioned, Dexter, the Hornets just got another big in Naz Reid. That was really the one archetype that I thought the Hornets were missing. Of course, now they're missing a starting point guard unless it's Kobe White, but they did not have a stretch big to really help them. And this means that with Diabate, who, as we both think is not going to be dealt, and Naz Reid on the floor, that they're going to find time for each of them to play separately and together, which then makes me wonder, where is the minute load for Kalkbrenner?
Mm-hmm.
He's a good backup. He's young. He just finished his rookie year, but he actually, among players who played at least 25 games, he was third in the NBA in contested rebound percentage. Mitchell Robinson was second. So
Hmm.
this is someone who can get boards, is a really good rim protector, not going to be good on the perimeter. The Knicks' point of attack defense needs to get better there. But what I really like about Kalkbrenner is any issue of salary goes away because he's under contract for cheap for 3 more years. So you can have him and you can have Huckporty. And to say that Kalkbrenner and Huckporty is better in the aggregate than Mitchell Robinson, I don't even agree with. But from a dollars and cents perspective and how you have to play the rest of the game while balancing these salaries, to me, that is threading the needle the best that you can.
Hmm.
So on paper, I don't necessarily want Kalkbrenner. I want Mitchell Robinson. But dealing with the realities of everything here, there aren't that many guys. Missi's another one where you're paying them as they're on the up and up. They're younger, so there's less wear and tear, and they're still able to give you what you want. And someone like Kalkbrenner, who's a tremendous play finisher and can play really well on the offensive half court, that's the type of guy where, again, he's not the most ideal, but if he is a solid plan B or plan C, it's worth it. And if he gets played off the floor in the playoffs like Luke Cornett, which could be a possibility if he's a
That
little bit more
is.
slow-footed,
Hmm.
then it's okay. Well, we've got Huckporty to at least share some minutes. We can play Cat a little bit more. There is no foolproof option because if there were, it would have been solved. So
Right.
it's just what's the best that we can do if we're the Knicks.
I think some fans are not going to want to hear that. That's not the way they want to look at it, but
Of
that's
course.
kind of what the situation is. The other problem with that is I like Kalkbrenner too as an option for the reasons you said, even though I have concerns about him defensively and
Mhm.
how he could hold up in the playoffs, particularly. But the rebounding, I didn't even know he in the contested rebounding rate that he was third. That's actually really impressive as a rookie. Um, the problem is what's the cost going to be? Right. The same applies for Missi. I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, you can just do this and you could have Deuce." I've seen that name brought up, although
Mhm.
I do agree with you that's doesn't really help the team because you're losing shooting and point of attack defense that you probably really don't want to lose. But let's just say you do that, or Dottier, Kolek, some combo of that for Kalkbrenner and that too, any something like that with one of those 3 players. Yeah, but what picks are you attaching to that? I know the Knicks just picked up six, what is 5, 6 second rounders
Mhm.
in this it's this year's draft. I get they've got some stuff to trade, but none of this stuff is easy. And here's the other problem, Jeremy. All the teams know what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
They know that you need to get a backup big. So everybody's going to know you're desperate. And if I know you're desperate, I'm going to
Mhm.
say, well, you're going to have to pay up a little bit more, man. You're going to have to give me a little something more here to get this done. I just want to step aside from Mitchell Robinson for a second because you mentioned something that's also right. The big question is where does Landry Shamet fit into all of this, right? Especially after what we saw from the playoffs. He did not miss a 3 for like a month. He was hot. Um, Mike Brown always trusted him. He trusted him all season long, so it wasn't new in the playoffs, even when he fell out the rotation. Do you look at him? I already heard how you feel about Mitch, but do you look at him as a must bring back role player? Or does his return depend entirely on what happens with Mitchell Robinson?
I do view Shaman as a must return in a different way. So, yes, I would prefer between Mitchell Robinson and Landry Shamet to retain Mitchell Robinson. Shamet had a career year in many ways, and there's something to be said of that he doesn't quite get to this level. That said, I know the front office, really, Mike Brown loves him. He loves being in New York. I think they can find a way to make this work, but it's also when you look at the money that's there, I don't know who the Knicks are signing to the taxpayer mid-level exception that takes up the same chunk of salary where you're getting a player who is as good or better than Landry Shamet. And there are some names, of course, that are out there and happy to discuss them, but the free agent market is going to be fairly dry. And what we're looking at is who's a reliable wing. Because yes, you could have Diawara come in there, but you do also need someone who can put the ball on the floor. And there aren't a lot of guys who are going to be available that you trust that work with what you're doing. And they have to be free agents because you're not going to be able to trade. Because the thing about the taxpayer mid level exception that's different from the non taxpayer mid level exception is you can use the non taxpayer mid level exception to acquire a player into it. You can trade for a player. You can't do that with the taxpayer mid-level exception. So you have $6 million of money to spend exclusively on the open market. Now, the thing is, and we haven't even talked about this, the Knicks
Hmm.
do not have to solve their backup five until the deadline. They don't have to. Would we
Hmm.
love for them to do it from day one? Of course. There's a lot of time between now and the deadline. But if they found a way to scrape by, they could do that. Not ideal by any stretch of the matter. But we saw it. Yabusele was not in the rotation. And the
Good
Knicks
point.
still used his salary to get Alvarado, which led them in many ways to a championship. So there can be a delay in how the Knicks go about this, but you also don't want to mess with a key position. And if there's not a lot of backup there. So, and I've even looked at, can you get someone like a Bitadze mid-season? You can, but the margins get slimmer because you have to basically set your team up now to create that avenue to do that. And that isn't going to be the easiest thing either, but it's not impossible.
Hmm.
But to shift back with Shamet, I think you do need to retain him because he is going to likely be better than anyone you're signing at the taxpayer mid-level exception. The only difference is, does his salary push this team to such a breaking point where they then can't fill out the rest of the roster? Based on some of the math I was looking at, if he's exceeding 7.5 million, and there's some math to play with, but if he's going higher than that, the
It's
Knicks are
hard.
going to have a really tough time filling out the rest of the roster with Mitchell Robinson leaving. So now you're looking at a world where Mitch is gone, Shamet's gone. How are you maintaining? How are you able to be that team that is championship caliber when two of your key bench players are just gone with nothing to show for it?
I would like to also add to that that a lot of some people are going to hear you say that and say, well, "Who's going to give Landry Shamet that much money?" Somebody will.
They
So
could.
he
Absolutely.
he could get higher than the 7.5 million you mentioned there. He could get 8 or 9 million. There's going to be a team that's going to value his shooting, his championship experience. Let's also talk about this because he's a guy who's been on non-guaranteed contracts the last 2 seasons. He is looking to cash in. This may be his last chance to really cash in. Mitchell Robinson, we know of his injury history. This may also be his last chance to really cash in. And for both of those guys, if I was their agent, I'm like, you guys are just coming off of a championship. You just were integral in helping this Knicks team win. So when we talked about James Dolan's money, we cannot fault these players who have a very, not saying that you are, Jeremy, because I know
No.
you're not, but they have very limited shelf life to do what they do at a high level. And these guys are going to try to cash in. Do you think there's, if Landry can't return to the Knicks, because his numbers is interesting and it does, as you mentioned, hinge a lot on what happens with Mitch. Um, because the big question, how do you replace the shooting? How do you replace the on-ball defense? Do you The free agent market is bare, but do you think there's any names out there that could be a low-cost replacement for Landry Shamet?
It's such a premium position. I mean, the Knicks got
Yeah, it is.
so lucky with Shamet being a minimum player, and I think there was an argument that, I mean, number one, the fact that he was unsigned until September
Crazy.
is it's crazy. But number two, to have just that amount uh, that it was, I mean, the Knicks got really lucky, and it wound up paying off absolutely. But it's you might be looking at, we can't get a wing, so do we look at another position and then try to move a player for a different position? Like Mamu is one example.
Hmm.
If you're the Knicks, sign a player like him to the taxpayer mid-level exception, and then you've got 6 million to play with at the deadline, you could do that. But now you're looking for a wing, which is a premium position at only $6 million. How are you able to make that work? It's really tough because you're going to have to find someone who is backup caliber,
Yep.
where then they're on a cheap contract, but then do you
Mhm.
have to pay them? So I would hope that seeing someone like Jordan Goodwin, who got a 3-year, $19 million offer, that extension for
Essentially.
third year was a player option, that's around 6 million a year. I would hope that Landry Shamet doesn't get a lot more than that. But you simply don't know. It takes one team to make it uncomfortable. And I think there's another argument where Shamet on a contract that's greater than, say, the $7.5 million threshold is overpaid, and it may not age well because this is also someone who missed 30 plus games I mean, it's a little bit over 30 for each of the years that he was with the Knicks. And it's unfortunate that it was the shoulder injury, and we could say one was the freak injury and the other was a hard screen. And it doesn't really matter because he missed that time objectively. So there is the need to retain him, but it has to be at a price point that works for everyone. Ultimately, and this is not inside information or anything, I just gut feel like they do get there because I know that he wants to be here.
Mhm.
So if you can keep that in house, that player on your team, and then say, hey, this is why we are offering you this amount because we need to do this and that, they're all puzzle pieces and it kind of falls into place. But a lot of it is almost, do you back your way into a Landry Shamet contract? You have to move forward, of course. And I think he's the first domino of everything. But you also have to work backwards. And can we get 12, 13, 14 players under contract before the first game of the season? And if it's under 14, do we have enough room to sign guys who are rookies at the cheapest salary possible to fitting in there, like what the Knicks did with Diawara and what they even did with Huckporty the year before? How can we make this all work? So Shamit is truly a wild card in how the maths.
It's crazy too, because also just you just said to my question, there aren't a lot of good replacements for him out there because the wing position and shooting at his level is just such at a premium, and it's gonna be it's gonna be tough. Jeremy, are there any other names out there that you believe the Knicks should be targeting in free agency? And it's so tough. This is maybe the toughest free agency preview I've had to do because so much hinges on whether or not these two players will go back. And we could be sitting at 7 o'clock on Tuesday and being like, "Yo, what's going on here? Are the Knicks doing anything?" I don't expect a lot of movement from the Knicks in the first hour. We could be wrong, but who knows? Are there any other names you feel like the Knicks should be targeting here in free agency?
There really aren't. I mean, the way that I see it is also you have to find a player that's comfortable taking the taxpayer mid-level exception. And the starting five is set, right? And then you've got Alvarado, you've got Deuce, assuming he's not traded, and then you somehow find a big. And let's assume that the replacement for Mitchell Robinson is not found with the taxpayer mid-level exception, that it's through a trade or a veteran minimum signing. You've got 9 players with Diawara. So at what point, you could probably find someone who's more of a 3-4, but there's not a lot of playing time. I would imagine the Knicks want to put Diawara and give him an expanded role. He was a rookie, came
Yeah.
onto the scene. Now is the time to give him more of a chance. So there could be a player that's trying to ring chase, but are they so good that they're moving through and comfortable taking less than they might? I mean, there could be a Gary Trent Jr., but I think that the Gary Trent Jr. Hoopla has hopefully passed by this point. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Gary Trent Jr. I just think that the idea of Gary Trent Jr. is better than who he has been in reality for the last couple seasons. And maybe he buys into the role and maybe he fits. But this is someone who, in my opinion, did not do anything in Milwaukee to warrant getting more than the shade above the minimum exception that he would be earning with his player option. So you're not spending your taxpayer mid-level exception on him. So yeah, you could have him, but now does that displace Deuce McBride? And you're still losing some of that point of attack defense, but that you would have had with Shamet. So there really aren't a lot of great options, and you can get OG. I was Diawara. He's so prototypical to OG in build that I confuse Diawara and OG. But
Understood.
yeah, of course. But you can have him be a flexible player positionally, but there just aren't a lot of guys who can spell him for that cost who also aren't too old. And because if they're younger, they're going to want to make their money. Like, yeah, you could get Keon Ellis probably at the taxpayer mid-level exception, but also, what are you sacrificing? You're sacrificing height. You're sacrificing a player who really didn't see time in the playoffs because
Nope.
he just wasn't trusted. He's been on multiple teams, and analytically, he's a darling. But clearly enough to the analytical king of Kenny Atkinson, he didn't even trust Keon
He didn't
Ellis.
trust him. Right. He played him.
So
I think we saw him come in game 2, and that was really it. Yeah.
exactly. So I just wish that there were better options, but if there were better options, they would probably be outpriced on the market, which is why Landry Shamet's so important.
Yeah. And see, I had a feeling that's how you were going to answer that question. And because I'm looking and I'm like, I just don't see it, which I get it. That answer is only going to stress Knicks fans out even more. It's only going to stress them out even more. I guess we could wrap with this. I'm trying to give you a big picture question. When free agency opens at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, what would make you say the Knicks had a successful start to this offseason free agency period? Is it keeping Mitch, finding a cheaper center, bringing back Shamet, or simply just what you've brought up, simply staying flexible enough that they're able to make another move later? What would make you determine this was a successful start to free agency? What do the Knicks have to do for it to be a success?
Assuming that Mitchell Robinson isn't retained and that James Dolan doesn't wake up and say, you know what, second apron, forget about it, let's go above it. The way that the Knicks can win the offseason for themselves is retaining Landry Shamet, filling out their roster, and setting themselves up in a way where, number one, they can find a center that works for them. Number two, or they find a player that helps them get a guy at the deadline. If they're not a finished team and they need some reinforcements, opening the door to have that down the line is imperative. They have to be able to do that, because it's one thing to just go into this season and say, here's our team. But it's another to say, how can we use the resources, the limited resources available to us, to not only make a good team or a great team, but a great team that also has salary avenues to get better. Because the buyout market, in many ways, is fool's gold. Jeremy Sohan will always be a Knick. Once a Knick, always a Knick, and a
Once a Knick, always a
champion
Knick.
at that. I don't know if he's ever going to put a shirt on, but that's okay, because he's still celebrating, and I love that for him. But Sohan, of course, other than perhaps the intel on the Spurs side, there wasn't a lot. There were moments, flashes, but there wasn't a lot that he was able to do, because buyout candidates usually are not these incredible players that lift you. So you have to look towards the trade market. And if the Knicks can set themselves up to start the season and have the flexibility to make even modest improvements, assuming everyone's healthy, in February, that will be a success. But they're working with what they have to, and that's really that.
What do you think the chances are that we get to Tuesday and we realize James Dolan has changed his mind? That he's like, hey, I'm going to second apron be damned. I'm going over it. I'm going past it. I bring back Mitchell Robinson and Landry Shamet. Do you think that's likely or not likely? Just gut feeling.
Gut feeling is, I think what was said is what's going to happen. I think, if anything, it's sort of like caving to public pressure, which the Knicks have never done before, but even internal pressure. James Dolan has been told by the front office what happens and what needs to happen. It's not like this was a spur of the moment thing where he goes to WFAN and says, you know what, I feel like not spending anymore. This was calculated. So what would really have to change? I mean, the Knicks won a title. And lest we forget, if the Knicks hadn't won a title and they pursued, fortunately they don't have to, Giannis Antetokounmpo, any trade that they would have made, Dexter, would have hard capped them at the second apron, because they would have aggregated salaries. When they were poking around on Yves Missi, I understand the reporting, and I don't even disagree with it, that the front office was surprised by Dolan's comments. But the Knicks poking around on someone like Missi, dating back to the deadline, to me, that's like, okay, well, was there always a consideration of what happens if Mitchell Robinson walks? What do we do? What if we can't pay him? What if we can't stay below the second apron? So it's not like, my outside perspective is, I don't think James Dolan just made this up capriciously and that was it. He knew what every angle was and seems made his decision. And if that's the decision that's staying, then that's the decision the Knicks need to work around. And as unfortunate as it may be, it's the reality we're living in.
Fans are not going to like that. I've already been seeing it. I'm sure you have too. They're not going to like it. I feel it's going to be a very interesting Tuesday, very interesting offseason. I'm with you though. I think they win this free agency part of the offseason, I will say, if they allow themselves to still have some flexibility. I am going to take this era of where we are in the NBA and understand it for what it is, and understand there's some hard decisions that have to be made. I don't love everything about it. I don't know how. It's funny. I never asked you. I don't know how you feel about the second apron, Jeremy, and everything about it. There are things I like about it and things I do not like about it. It's not a perfect uh, system. I do enjoy the parody, but I do want to see teams have the chance to legitimately run it back and keep their guys, but also would like to see owners spend money. All these things can be true.
Yeah.
All these things can be true, right? Like the owners should spend money, especially when they profit so much, like the Knicks owner does. This is not a knock on him. It's not my money, and I understand all that, but I do think it's a tough sell to the fan base after they waited so long to win a title. And there is a world, and I'm not wishing this on anybody, where opening night could come and I likely will be there and you will be there and we'll see the Knicks raise the banner and there could be boos for James Dolan after a title. There could be.
No.
But we'll see. We'll see how this free agency period goes. There's not a lot of options. I trust the Knicks front office, but they've also, some kind of way, they've been dealt a tough hand. I'll say here. They've been dealt a kind of tough hand to play with, but we'll see how it goes. That, everybody, is Jeremy Cohen. Please check him out with Knicks Film School. Does a fantastic job hosting Cap or No Cap. Hopefully he helped you make some sense of what could happen for the Knicks in free agency. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you think the Knicks should or should not do in free agency. Should Landry Shamet be back? Should Mitchell Robinson be back? Do you think both will be back? Jeremy and I, we don't know what's going to happen. We just have to wait and see. Jeremy, I appreciate you, man. Good to see you again. I got to see you after the parade. That was good, and we chatted for a bit. And I knew for you, it was going to be right back to the cap sheet and right there. I almost feel like we barely got to enjoy any of this. We're right back into it.
No rest for the weary. I'll tell you, I didn't even know that the draft was starting on Tuesday until like 4 days beforehand. I was like, oh,
don't
great. I hadn't even figured out what time and day it was and didn't know the second round was at night or during the day because it used to be during the day. So, but here we are.
We are right back at it. All right, everybody. Check out Jeremy Cohen. As I said, I'm Dexter Henry. That's going to do it for this edition of New York Got Game. We'll catch you next time where we will be talking about what the Knicks have or haven't done in free agency. See you guys then. Peace.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.